Well, the mid-season finale of Invincible is here, and it definitely felt like one. Following on from the shocking reveal in last week's episode when Nolan appeared as the Emperor of Thraxa, this episode picked up directly from that whilst showing us how he became the leader of the Thraxan species, along with the threats from the Viltrumites, whilst giving us a somewhat familiar condition of the characters upon the ending. So with that, let's recap, break down, and explain all that there was to take away from this episode. So let's get into it. Here is Invincible Season 2 Episode 4 Ending Explained. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. Let's look at each of the characters and their arcs in this episode. Nolan. Nolan's reintroduction into the season of the show is one which was unexpected in the moment, but one that was definitely welcomed. Within this episode, we saw the aftermath of what occurred in the Season 1 finale, and that he just flew deeper and deeper into space, until the point where he was going to end things for himself, showing that he did have a deep sense of guilt inside of him. Due to him having a large beard at that point, it showed that he'd travelled millions of miles and had been gone for a long while. Something that also supported how long he travelled for was that he mentioned how far away Thraxa was to Mark when Mark was going to leave. During the time where he was about to end things for himself, he saw a ship that had failed and was on the cusp of being destroyed, but he intervened and returned it back to the planet for safe landing. This is where he was first introduced to the Thraxans, and they chose him to be their leader, something which he'd never experienced before. In the present day, it looked as though Mark was conflicted in how he wanted to feel towards his father when he laid eyes upon him. He clearly missed him due to the fact that he hugged him the moment that he saw him. But then, after that had worn off, we saw that Mark met him with aggression and didn't want to give him the time of day, because he believed that he was still the same person as he was when he left Earth. At this point, we were still none the wiser as to why Nolan requested Mark's arrival on the planet, but it was revealed shortly after that it was because Nolan had had a baby with a Thraxan creature called Andrissa, even though we didn't find out their child's name because we were told that they decide their own names when they learn to speak. His brother's name will eventually go on to be Oliver. Nolan wanted Mark on the planet because he knew that the Viltrumites would be coming for him, due to the fact that he abandoned his post on Earth, and also because they're particular about the species that they breed with, they'd want to eradicate Oliver for being what they deemed an inferior species. Nolan's conviction was falling on deaf ears for a long while, but it soon became clear that he did genuinely care for Andrissa and the Thraxan kind, something which made him feel confused and angry, as he knew that his kind were not programmed to think like that. Before long though, the Viltrumite soldiers arrived on the planet and we saw an epic fight scene taking place. Genuinely one of the best that I've seen in a long while. It was bloody, brutal, and just purely epic. Lucan was the first Viltrumite soldier that we saw Nolan fighting, and Nolan managed to get him to subdue after slashing him open. There was a line in particular that was spoken in this scene where Lucan said to Nolan, "You deserve death." This was spoken in the context of Nolan betraying the Viltrumites, but with Nolan responding with, "I know." I think that was him leaning into the fact that he felt that he deserved to die for the way that he treated the people on Earth and his son, Mark, and also Debbie. With him defeating Lucan in that moment, we saw Mark and Nolan have to take on two other soldiers, in which Nolan was managing to do okay, but he had to convince Mark to go harder on them. Nolan's methods of killing are just purely horrific to watch, and hearing the victims still speaking when they're in a crushed or broken state is something that just makes you think of how horrible it would be to be on the receiving end of that. With Nolan managing to defeat the both of them, out of nowhere, Lucan came back and broke Nolan's back, where he was then captured and taken back to Viltrum, with Nolan saying, "Remember the good I've done, read my books, Mark." It makes me think that there's going to be some kind of hint or clue as to what he could do that's going to be hidden in the books, maybe some kind of emergency plan, but with Debbie leaving the box of books on the side of the road, it could all go wrong in that sense. Mark's arc in this season has been extremely interesting to watch, and that didn't change in this episode of the show either. At the center point of his narrative has been the fact that he doesn't want to become his father, and he's been trying to avoid it throughout every episode. However, within this episode, we saw that he needed to lean into a side of him that would channel the murderous side of his father in order to fight for survival, because he was on the back foot when against the soldier. After hearing from Nolan that he shouldn't hold back because if he did, then he, his father, and all of the Thraxans would die, he did start to get the upper hand, but when it came to delivering the final blow and killing the soldier, he failed to do so and was wounded and was on the cusp of being killed. That was until Nolan saved him. Mark's motto at the moment is that he doesn't kill anybody, and he went the full length without finishing her off, something which, despite being a win in the sense that he has a strong mentality and that he stands by his word, it was his biggest downfall on the battlefield. So even when in the situation of life or death, he wasn't willing to believe that he was to be like his father, so it shows that the character is true to his core beliefs. With Mark lying on the rock and saying, "Dad," just like in the season 1 finale, it mirrored the ending, and I think highlighted that there's just no escaping devastation and destruction when Nolan is around. At the end, we were introduced to General Krieg, who essentially said that it was now Mark's job to carry on with his father's mission in preparing Earth to become part of the Viltrum Empire, and if he didn't, then millions of people would be killed. So it's going to be interesting to see what Mark does when he gets back to Earth. He's obviously not going to do it, but I wonder how he's going to get around it. With regards to Mark's brother Oliver, I feel Mark's most probably going to take him back to Earth with him. Maybe even Andrissa if she survived. I think the placing of the baseball glove is something that could be symbolic of that. We know that one was Nolan's and the other was Mark's, but with Oliver coming back, we could see that relationship starting to develop, and because the Thraxan species ages much quicker than humans, by the time they get to Earth he'll already be older. Debbie. Well, it seems like Debbie is finally breaking through the barrier that Nolan had over her, and she's ready to move on. Her somber mindset was something which mirrored Nolan's from the opening section when he was traveling through space, and I thought that was a really clever choice for the show to make, showing that despite the fact that they were on two different sides when it came to the destruction and the broken heart, they were both experiencing the same thing. I really enjoy the way that the show has handled Debbie's journey through grief over the course of these 4 episodes. It felt so convincing, and the loneliness that has been exhibited in the shots, the performance, and the writing of the character has been exceptional. With Debbie meeting with Art, we saw that he managed to convince her that she had the strength within her to be able to pick herself back up and to move on, and that throughout the entirety of her marriage she was pretty much doing that anyway, because Nolan was always out saving the world and leaving her on her own. So that was the final thing that gave her the motivation to be able to finally move on. With Debbie saying to Cecil that she felt that he was only giving her the money from the books that Nolan made in order to keep Mark close, I wonder if Cecil will resort to other measures to ensure that Mark doesn't drift away, as it already seems like he is. So I feel when the show does return next year, we'll see a different side to Debbie. Donald. Donald had a larger feature in this episode, and it was all focused around him mulling over what Debbie said in the previous episode where she was shocked to see him. It hadn't sat right with him for a while, and he was clearly wondering what it was that was going on, so much so that he logged into Cecil's account on the computer after finding his glasses in the wreckage, and then went on to watch the footage of when Nolan destroyed him. This concluded with him getting a knife and putting it in him to see if he would bleed, and at first he did and believed that he was human, but with the tip of the blade bending and looking damaged from when he put it in, it shows that there's some mechanical goodness going on underneath his human-looking exterior. So we're definitely going to see that being explored even more when the show does return. Eve. Your powers don't make you a hero, they make you dangerous. This was a line that was spoken by Eve's father to her in the previous episode, and it was obvious that it was something that had stuck with her, so much so that she was in a rather down state when walking around and bumping into Amber. With Kill Cannon arriving and her looking to defeat him, amongst the battle that was taking place, we saw that it caused 2 individuals to fall off of the bridge in their car, and Eve had to rescue them, but judging by the response it seemed like the 2 humans died as a result, with her genuinely believing that she's losing sight of what a hero is and that she may cause more damage than good. It seems like she's going to be resisting getting involved in trying to make a difference. Her father's words are ringing loud and clear in her ears, and I don't think that's going to stop anytime soon, especially with what just happened. Overall review. I thought this was the best episode of the season for sure. The Mark and Nolan scenes were just incredible to watch. They developed the story forwards in a way that was just smooth and effortless, all whilst getting across emotion, heartbreak and confliction. It was just amazing. I was disappointed again that we didn't see much of Angstrom Levy. That's 2 episodes now that we've not properly seen him, and the first episode was where we saw him the most. But I feel he's going to be tying into what will eventually become the season finale. The Invincible title card cracked down even further again in this episode, and I think it definitely looks like we're going to be getting the blue suit when Mark lands back on Earth. We know that it gets created for him, and with his suit taking a beating whilst on Thraxa, maybe he's ready for his new one. It's a shame because we've only had 4 episodes, and the mid-season finale is now over, which means that the show won't be returning until 2024. So many shows are doing this now, and I'm not really a huge fan of that move, but if it's been done to fill the void that's going to be there due to the strikes that were taking place, then it's understandable. Overall, this season finale was exactly what was needed to send us out waiting for the show when it does return. So, there you have it, Invincible Season 2 Episode 4 Ending Explained.